The silence after Elena's scream was unbearable. For a single suspended moment, the abyss held its breath. The Skeleton King's hollow eyes dimmed, cracks racing across its ancient bones as its throne disintegrated beneath it. The tide of souls, once endless and united in their whispers, fractured into chaos. Some dissolved into spiraling light, shredding into nothingness, while others clawed desperately at the collapsing temple, their faces twisted in terror at their unraveling eternity. The drowned city, held together by the resonance of memory, began to fail. The Icarus shuddered as seismic waves tore through the trench. Massive stone pillars toppled into the abyss, smashing against the ocean floor in bursts of phosphorescent dust. Cracks spread across the temple dome, unleashing torrents of black water that surged inward. The current seized the sub, dragging it violently toward the crumbling spires. Marcus roared over the alarms, his voice raw and commanding. "Engines to full. Yuki, stabilize her. David, wake the hell up and keep those ballast systems online." David, shaking and pale, fumbled desperately with his controls, muttering prayers under his breath. Yuki's hands flew across the console, sweat pouring down her face as she fought the surge of collapsing pressure. Sparks rained from the ceiling, the lights flickering wildly. In the center of the chaos, Elena remained kneeling, her glow unstable, her body trembling, as though she were both breaking apart and holding herself together by sheer will. Spirals still flickered across her skin, weaker now, but alive. She whispered, her voice trembling. "They're gone. The tide, it's unraveling. I broke it. I broke the chain." Marcus grabbed her shoulders, shaking her gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. "No, you saved us. But if we don't move now, we'll drown with this damned city. Can you stand?" Her spiraled eyes met his, fragile yet burning with determination. "Yes, I can." The Icarus groaned as debris smashed against its hull, glowing shards of the collapsing temple tumbling around them like meteors. Beyond the viewport, the once still abyss had become a storm of spiraling currents. The tide of souls, freed from their prison, screamed soundlessly as they scattered into the black, their light unraveling like torn fabric. Yuki's voice cut through the chaos, hull integrity dropping. "We can't stay in the trench. If we don't ascend now, we're done." Marcus gritted his teeth. "Then we climb." Engines roared. The Icarus tilted upward, fighting the crushing pull of the trench as the drowned city collapsed below them. Whole towers cracked apart like brittle coral, spiraling lights bursting from within, as if the very memories stored inside were breaking free. The Skeleton King's remains toppled into the abyss, its bony hand still reaching upward, even as it dissolved into spiraling dust. David screamed as another quake hit. "We're not gonna make it. The pressure's tearing us apart." Elena staggered forward, her body blazing brighter, spirals burning across her skin. She placed her glowing hand on the sub's trembling console. Instantly, the alarms shifted, stabilizing for a fleeting moment. The hull groaned, then steadied as though braced by an unseen force. Marcus stared in awe. "What the hell did you just do?" Her voice shook. "I can still feel them, the fragments. The tide may be broken, but I can use what's left. I can hold the city back for a while." Yuki's eyes widened. "Elena, no. You're burning yourself out. If you hold on to that power, it'll kill you." Elena's face was pale, but calm, illuminated by the spirals. "Then let it. Better me than all of us." Marcus slammed his fist against the console. "No, don't you dare talk like that. We didn't come this far to trade your life for ours. There has to be another way. But already, the abyss roared louder, the walls of the trench collapsing inward. The pressure mounted, and the Icarus buckled. Elena braced both hands against the glass, her body blazing like a beacon in the storm. Through the spirals in her eyes, the abyss bent, currents shifting, debris sliding away, the crushing pressure loosening its grip. For a fleeting moment, the impossible happened. The ocean listened. The Icarus surged upward, cutting through the chaos as Elena's light parted the collapsing trench. Towering pillars disintegrated into glowing dust around them. The tide of unraveling souls wailed in fury and sorrow, scattering into the black. The drowned city, once eternal, sank into ruin. Marcus stood at the helm, jaw clenched, sweat pouring down his face. His eyes flicked again and again to Elena, his voice breaking as he shouted over the roar, "Hold on, Elena, just a little longer. We're almost clear." Her body trembled violently, her glow flickering, blood traced from her nose, glowing faintly as it mixed with the spirals. Yet she smiled faintly, her voice a whisper drowned in the storm. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Even endings can shine." The abyss behind them collapsed completely, a shockwave racing upward. The Icarus shot through the spiraling chaos, battered but alive, tearing free from the trench as the drowned city disappeared forever into darkness. At last, silence returned. The sub floated in the cold black of the upper abyss, its lights flickering weakly, its crew gasping for breath. Elena collapsed into Marcus's arms, her glow fading, her spirals retreating into faint scars across her skin. Her eyes fluttered closed as she whispered one final word, "Remember." And then she went still. The silence after the collapse was suffocating. The Icarus drifted through the upper reaches of the abyss like a wounded beast, its lights dim, its hull groaning in protest. No more spirals glowed in the water around them. No phantom voices whispered through the hull. The drowned city was gone, buried forever beneath the weight of the ocean, its kingdom of memory shattered. And yet the survivors could not celebrate. The air inside the cabin was thick with exhaustion and grief. Marcus sat slumped at the helm, his knuckles white around the controls, though the engines now hummed weakly on their own. His eyes, bloodshot and hollow, kept flicking toward the crumpled figure in his arms. Elena lay still, her face pale, her skin cold. The spirals that once glowed so brilliantly across her body had faded into faint scars, like delicate etchings burned into her flesh. She no longer blazed with impossible light. She was only human again. Yuki sat opposite, her trembling hands wrapped around a half-dead console, trying to force it to respond. The machine groaned, screens flickering with fractured data. At last she gave up, slamming her fists against the metal. Her shoulders shook, but no sound escaped her lips. She could not bear to cry. Not yet. Not when Marcus still held on to Elena, as if she could wake at any moment. David, silent until now, pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the viewport. His breath fogged the surface as he whispered in broken fragments, "We should have left. We should have never come. None of this should have happened." His words dissolved into a sob he tried desperately to swallow. The minutes dragged into hours. Slowly, steadily, the Icarus climbed. The crushing weight of the deep began to ease. As they rose through layers of cold darkness, strange creatures swam in and out of the light. Shimmering jellies, spiraling squids, darting schools of lanternfish. To Marcus, they all looked like fragments of the abyss mocking them. little reflections of the spirals that had haunted Elena's eyes. Then, at last, after endless darkness, the water began to pale. The pressure lightened, the sea shifted, and a faint glow appeared above them. For the first time in weeks, the survivors saw something other than black. The surface. The Icarus broke through with a shuddering gasp, water crashing against its battered frame. Salt spray lashed against the viewport as the endless expanse of the ocean opened around them, sky stretching vast and unbroken overhead. The survivors staggered, their eyes wide, blinded by the sheer brightness of the sun. After so long in the abyss, the light was almost unbearable. Marcus exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. His voice was ragged but filled with awe. "We made it. We're back." Yuki collapsed into her chair, tears finally spilling freely down her cheeks. The sunlight reflected in her eyes, glistening like salvation. David, too stunned to speak, sank to his knees, his hands clutching his head as he laughed and sobbed all at once. But Marcus did not move. He still held Elena in his arms, the salt wind whipping his face, his eyes fixed on her motionless form. The sunlight fell across her pale skin, warming her scars, illuminating the faint spirals that remained. They no longer glowed, they no longer whispered, they were only shadows of what she had carried. Yuki's voice broke the silence, hoarse and desperate. She's gone, isn't she?" Marcus did not answer. He brushed a strand of wet hair from Elena's face, his thumb tracing the scar along her temple. His lips trembled as he whispered into her ear, "You said, remember, I will. I swear I will." For a long while, no one spoke. The ocean rocked them gently, the surface deceptively calm, as if mocking the nightmare they had endured below. But then, something shifted. Yuki's eyes darted to the water outside. The waves around the Icarus rippled strangely, spiraling outward in patterns too precise to be natural. David froze, staring wide-eyed at the sea. No, it can't be." The water shimmered with faint light. Spirals began to bloom across the surface of the waves, glowing faintly, spreading in wider and wider circles. The survivors watched in horror as the familiar symbols etched themselves into the ocean itself, stretching toward the horizon. Marcus staggered to his feet, holding Elena tighter. "She broke it. She destroyed the city. This can't be happening." But Yuki shook her head violently, her voice cracking. "It's not gone. She carried it with her. The tide didn't die. It followed us. She's still connected." David backed away from the viewport, panic rising in his throat. "Then we didn't escape. We didn't escape at all." The spirals grew brighter, glowing across the waves, like fire in the water. And then, faintly, impossibly, a whisper filled the cabin. Soft, melodic, unbearably familiar. "Remember." It was Elena's voice. Her eyes fluttered open, just for a moment, spirals flickering faintly within them. She exhaled a ragged breath, her lips curving into a fragile smile. The crew froze in stunned silence. Marcus held her tighter, his own tears falling freely now. "Elena, you're here. You're alive." But her whisper came again, softer, sorrowful, as if carried on the tide itself. "Not alive. Not gone. I am the sea now." And the spirals across the waves burned brighter, as though the entire ocean had become her memory. The spirals spread endlessly across the waves, glowing brighter than the stars above. The sea itself seemed alive now, pulsing with patterns no tide had ever known. From horizon to horizon, The ocean shimmered like liquid glass, each ripple carrying the same symbol burned into Elena's flesh. The survivors stood in the battered shell of the Icarus, their eyes reflecting the impossible spectacle. For a moment, there was silence, a silence so profound that it felt like the world itself was waiting to exhale. Marcus clutched Elena against his chest, his throat tight, his breath ragged. He felt her heartbeat, faint, unsteady, but real. And yet her words echoed in his mind. Not alive, not gone. I am the sea now. He searched her spiraled eyes, desperate for the woman who had laughed with him, argued with him, fought beside him in the trench. But what stared back at him was something both more and less than Elena. Yuki's hands trembled as she pressed them against the viewport, her voice a whisper of awe and terror. She's not just connected to it anymore. She is it. The tide isn't broken. It's reborn. Through her, David backed away, shaking his head violently. His voice cracked, rising into hysteria. No, no, no. We didn't survive the abyss only to bring it here. Don't you see? This is the end. If the sea remembers everything, then nothing dies, nothing fades. The world will drown in memory. His words cut through the fragile silence like a knife. Marcus spun on him, fury in his bloodshot eyes. Shut up, she saved us. She gave us this chance. Don't you dare call her a curse. But David only pointed toward the glowing horizon, his whole body trembling. Look at it, Marcus. Look. It's already spreading. Soon, it won't just be the ocean. It'll be every river, every raindrop, every drop of blood in our veins. She's not Elena anymore. She's forever. The words hung heavy in the salt air. Even Marcus could not deny what he saw. The ocean was no longer the ocean. It was a living tapestry, a vast archive, its spirals shifting like thoughts across a mind too large to comprehend. He turned back to Elena, whose pale lips curved into a faint, sorrowful smile. Her voice was soft, layered, carried not by her throat, but by the sea itself. I can hear them all, the kings, the drowned, the forgotten. They're free now, but they need a vessel, a horizon. I am that horizon. Yuki's eyes filled with tears. Then what happens to us? Elena's spirals flared, and the waves around the Icarus shimmered like glass. In them, Yuki saw flickers of her own childhood, the day she first looked through a microscope, her mother's hands guiding hers, the moment she chose science over fear. David saw his first dive, the taste of salt on his lips, the terror and thrill of the unknown. Marcus saw Elena herself, smiling at him from the deck before their first plunge, her hair caught in the wind. The sea was remembering them. Elena's voice came again, stronger now, echoing through their minds and the water alike. You will not be forgotten. None of us will. That is my gift. But Marcus's chest tightened with dread. A gift, yes, but also a prison. If nothing was forgotten, then grief would never fade. Regret would never heal. Pain would live forever, etched into the tide, as surely as joy. Humanity's very soul would be bound to the sea. Yuki stepped back from the glass, shaking her head. Elena, please, you don't have to carry them. You don't have to carry everything. Let it go. Let yourself go. But Elena only smiled faintly, her spirals blazing like the dawn. The sea does not let go. It only holds. The horizon burned brighter. Ships far in the distance shone with spirals across their hulls. Storm clouds began to form above, lightning curling in impossible spirals across the sky. The tide was no longer confined. It was rewriting the world. Marcus held Elena tighter, torn between love and terror. His heart screamed to keep her, to anchor her, to believe that she was still his friend, his companion. But deep within, he knew the truth. Elena was not theirs anymore. She was everyone's. She belonged to the sea. Tears stung his eyes as he whispered against her hair, "If you are the sea, then remember me kindly." Her spiraled eyes softened, filled with a love both human and infinite. Always, the Icarus rocked violently as the sea erupted in light. Waves rose like mountains, spirals blazing in their crests. The survivors clung to the wrecked sub, their screams lost in the roar of the living tide. The storm surged, swallowing the horizon, until nothing remained but light and water and memory. And then, silence. When it cleared, the Icarus floated on a calm, endless sea. The sky was clear, the spirals gone from the waves. Only faint etchings lingered on Elena's skin, glowing faintly like embers in the dark. She lay in Marcus's arms, her breathing shallow but steady, her body warm again. The tide had receded, but somewhere, deep beneath, it still stirred, alive, waiting, eternal. The survivors stared out at the quiet horizon. They had escaped the abyss. They had returned to the world. But the world was no longer the same. For now, the sea was calm. For now, the horizon was theirs. But they all knew the ocean remembers forever.